Hello there. My name is Rob Leone. I am pleased to be spending the morning on Culture Matters with Chris Smith.
Rob, good morning. I think it's good morning. You sort of alluded to that, but it sounds like good morning. Yeah.
Yes, and as it came out of my mouth, I was realizing, well, it's not your morning, it's
No,
my
it's not.
morning, but I
No.
guess that someone at some point is going to listen to this in the morning, so it's going to resonate with
Yeah.
them.
So just to get all the dates right, that's it. We're recording this on the 27th of February, and my local time here is 4 o'clock, 10 past four. And this is Paris time, so that's where I'm recording. So over to you because I don't know you very well, but we did have a
Yeah,
bit of a chit chat before this. Do us a favor, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you are, what you
sure.
do as such, and what is your so-called cultural frame of reference. And a cultural
Yeah,
frame of reference is not 2 weeks in Cancun, right?
yeah.
That doesn't count. Go ahead.
It was a lot of fun, though, by the way.
Yeah,
But
I know, I've done it as well.
Yeah, as I mentioned, my name is Rob, and I'm a professor at Idaho State University here in the US. And my wife and myself own a consultancy, a boutique consultancy that focuses on human behavior. It's called Black River Performance Management.
Mhm.
I'm actually originally from Canada. I'm a Canadian. And the interesting piece of that is I've now lived in the US longer than I've lived in Canada. And so that was kind of my cultural perspective for many years is the differences between two countries. But since moving to the U.S., I've traveled. I've spent the last year on a sabbatical, traveling to different countries and learning more about other people's cultures
Mhm.
and how they might be in a lens to inform some of how we look at the concept of fit in North America.
Fit as an
And
FIT, the fit of
FIT,
people in an
yeah.
organization.
Yep.
Okay.
Or fit into a job or fit into a culture.
Uh-huh.
And how do I identify? I actually identify as a Western collectivist. And
Okay,
I'm
I
sure
know
we'll
you're going to go.
jump
We
into
had a
that a
chit
little.
chat before this, and
Yeah,
you threw
yep.
me off my feet here because that doesn't exist. I mean,
Right.
on paper, it doesn't exist. So elaborate a little bit with, or a lot with what you mean with what is a collectivistic? Where did I come from originally? Just do your thing.
Yeah. So, um, you know, with the West versus the East, let's start there. In general,
Sorry.
there
What is West and what is East?
Sure. Western cultures, Western countries versus Eastern countries. And it's not as clear as a line that you're on this side,
Uh,
so you're absolutely this versus you're on this side and you're absolutely this. And this is where this concept is informed from, is that we've historically looked at Western cultures as highly individualistic, right? That they have certain tendencies and behaviors that simply put, prioritize self in many instances, prioritize pursuit over maybe the well-being of a community, a well-being of family. And it doesn't mean that Westerners don't find family important,
mhm.
but in certain contexts, that American dream in many instances is built upon this concept of I could accomplish this and I can do the work. Whereas the collectivist notion, just simply put, um, and more affiliated with Eastern cultures, is that we are a part of a community. I am a part of a family. My identity is tied up in my family identity. And that there's actually certain social pressures that occur because of that, and we're subject to that. And and you've talked about this in the past on your podcast with others about how, Some people don't like to say no because they don't want to essentially rock the boat, or they have a tendency to save face. Whereas in the West, we tend to be a lot more direct.
Mhm.
And so when we handle people in massive buckets, and this is a binary bucket, right? Collectivist syndrome
Yeah.
versus individualist syndrome. And the term syndrome came from a researcher in the 80s, that these are essentially byproducts of the culture for which they're being raised.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you put things into one or two buckets, you're either this or that. That rarely serves people well. Mind you, that's how we often process a lot of stuff, right? And so where does my concept of Western collectivism comes in? It's the concept that, look, we need to take a hard look and start refining some of these buckets into maybe smaller bowls, if that. And we could better understand people's ambitions and tendencies and dispositions if we look at different, I call them fit factors.
Mhm.
And so historically, not historically, but over the years, institutions, organizations have been using the language, look, we like to hire according to fit. We want to make sure people fit with the team, fit with the nature of the job,
Mhm.
things like that. And some organizations do it very well, and some organizations are doing it very haphazardly,
Mhm.
so that in some instances it's a reflection of bias, good or bad. And so what I've spent the last year doing when on my sabbatical is actually looking at what can we glean from these individualist and collectivist syndromes and the research that's been done to help us better understand why I have a tendency to be more collaborative than my neighbor who's much more commanding. I have a tendency to prioritize the we and a community over my own individual personal pursuits. So I have a tendency to set aside my personal ambitions and gains to the greater good at a certain point. At some point, I have to take care of myself, right? Versus my neighbor that might, be very focused on what their accomplishments are, what they have. And then so ultimately what I've done is I'm backing up from that and looking at that through a work context. Well, how do these behaviors follow us into the work? And how can we, by better understanding this, right, breaking down this concept of the East is collective, the West is individualist, and refine these concepts further, can we do a better job of finding fit within organizations? So, for example, Chris, if you let's just say that you're the hiring manager and you're prioritizing certain behaviors and ambitions of the team, and you're trying to hire people that are really driven and less concerned with power orientation, just going to get the job done and much more commanding and direct. Well, that might not be a good fit for me because I have a tendency to use the pronouns we a lot more. I have a tendency to want to share decision-making processes. And the inverse is true also.
Mhm.
So that I, as a leader, have been hiring people historically around more of a collectivist feel, a collaborative feel, and that when I've hired people that are very of a certain fit factors, they don't mesh well with the team and the leadership practices that I lead by. And for many years, you chalk it up to this person's different than me. I don't have a language to explain how this
Uh-huh.
person's different from me, but they're just not fitting in with our team. And so where I am now is that I've been doing the research, I've been doing the reading, the synthesis of what's been done in academia to start to bring some light to these concepts so that I can begin to operationalize them and integrate them with a little bit more purpose in when I work with teams and organizations. And it's been very helpful because there is a diverse mix of people on teams, all different personality types, all different preferences,
Mhm.
but sometimes teams gel really well, whether that's by design or inadvertently, it just happens.
Mhm.
But then you have one change in that staff. Someone leaves, someone new comes in. They think they're going to be a great fit, and there's fit factors that are missing here that
Mhm.
are creating conflict, that are creating tension, that are negatively impacting some of the priorities and goals of the organization. So that's how I've been approaching this. So what am I once again? I am a Canadian that has a tendency to see myself as a Western collectivist.
Okay. Are you just not a nice guy? Simply, you're just a nice guy.
Hey,
I don't know. I mean, this is,
yeah,
or
but
is
there's,
that too
yeah,
simple?
that I think that is too simple. I think, um, yeah, I have appreciation for nice people, but at the same time, I don't possess all the characteristics that maybe a traditional collectivist might, which has some issues to do with power.
Mhm.
So, at what point is niceness, when we say, I guess we ask this, when we say nice, do we mean kind?
Yeah.
Do we mean friendly? You know what I mean? That's the
Sure.
challenge of just like I mentioned the two buckets to begin with. They're still broad and big. What
Yeah.
do we really mean by that? Because, the joke here in the US is, especially in light of the politics right now, why are you going after Canada? All they've done has been nice to people, right? Like, and there's also not nice people up there. There's just like there's great people in the US, there's great people in France. There's great people all around the world, but there's also some people that could do better, I guess I can say it that way, right?
And they're
So
great presidents and they're less great presidents.
exactly.
Let me let me add, what you just explained is quite complex.
Yeah.
I find that the concept is interesting, of course, positively interesting. And I'm
Yeah.
looking I don't prepare a lot for these podcasts, but
Yeah.
there are a few terms that I'd like to clear up. How do you
Yeah.
blend this in so your concept of a Western collectivistic or collectivist with something that's on a lot on your LinkedIn profile, self-leading.
Yeah.
What is self-leading culture? What do you mean with that?
Yeah. So part of this is a reflection of this belief that when I work with organizations, I try to do a couple different things. One, if it's of their desire, I try to flatten the leadership distance, which is actually very counter collectivism. Like collectivism, one of the attributes of collectivism is that leadership power difference is important, and that, as you know, in certain cultures and societies, if I'm at this rank or class, I may not make decisions for this team. I'll wait for my leader to tell me what I approve to do and what I can do. But so what I try to do though is I try to blend a lot of the bests of these pieces. And so what I'm trying to do is narrow that leadership power distance so that I can be more collective leading. I could be more collaborative leading. The buck still stops here at the end of the day as a leader, right?
Mhm.
But what decisions do I ultimately have to make on my own versus what decisions can I bring my team in to be a part of the decision making process? And this is important because a lot of leaders are inexperienced or green in the sense that they've learned their leadership approaches, tendencies, and practices from their past experiences with leaders, right? Good or bad, right or wrong. And so we're taking that into consideration so that we can bring people in at the points that report to this leader where they have the opportunity to have more influence, to have a higher level of decision making authority, to cultivate a level of psychological safety and camaraderie among each others. Because what ends up happening when we put these key pieces together, the leaders benefit because they could start spending more time leading instead of hand holding or managing. And the participants, the followers, the team benefit because they have more influence over each other. They will hold each other accountable more likely than pulling the leader in to deal with difficult situations. And so what ends up happening is that we build momentum. Think of that little piece, that little ball of snow rolling down the mountain, building momentum and size as it grows. That's what we're trying to do is cultivate this with where the leader eventually creates the conditions for the people to be successful, removes barriers, empowers people when they need to be empowered, handholds when they need a handhold, but really recognizing that the team has the talents and the wherewithal within themselves to be successful.
Is it and I've got the points that I'd like to bring up I got from your LinkedIn
Yeah.
profile. You say what I get from you, your focus tends to be more on organizational culture than on national culture in this case.
Yes.
But it's the
Yeah.
organization, right? That's important. You talk about high performance people, and
Yeah.
you talk less about low performance people. But if people are that important, shouldn't shouldn't you also focus on low performance people,
Absolutely.
or
Great
just kick them
question.
out? I say, sorry, I mean you're late. You're late for
No,
plans.
no, no, no,
That's the
no.
end of it. Bye. I don't know.
Well, and that's some people's approach, right? Hire fast, fire fast. And
Yeah.
that's not my approach. What I truly believe is that we have a lot of people that just haven't been given the opportunity to shine. People don't know what they don't know. All of us, we don't know what we don't know. But depending on the quality of the inputs and experiences in our life, that has an influence of our trajectory, right? We have a lot of people in our systems, in our organizations that just they're diamonds in the rough and they need the right things put in front of them so they can shine. They don't know necessarily at times how to take that next step to become a higher performer. They're well intentioned. That's where the role of the coach comes in, the role of the leader, the role of the collaborative peers helping leverage them in a non-com competition type of environment. And so I'm not, and that's one of the things I worried about when we created that profile. I was like, man, we're really focusing on maintaining and supporting high performers and exiting low performers. But let's be very clear to your point. We're also working with those lower performers to determine if they are legitimately low performers and that's where they're existing and they're not going to come out of that because of a variety of different factors versus what can I do if I'm practicing a certain style of leadership to help them make that next step up? And if I could just add this, I see this all the time that leaders set people up, and I don't mean all leaders, but
Oh, no, of
leaders
course.
set people up to be unsuccessful day one in many instances. They don't have a well understanding of onboarding,
Mm.
especially as it relates to organizational culture. They believe that just because they got through the hiring pool and they met the qualifications of the job, that they're competent and ready to run with it. You know, we've seen this. Here's your key, here's your name tag. I believe in you. You got this. And that's kind of a death wish for a lot of people because I might have the talents for my craft. I might be really good at marketing, but have I ever worked with this team? Have I ever worked with this software, right? Have I ever worked in this culture, national level culture, right? Things like that, that the leaders are setting them up to be unsuccessful. So if we could address how we onboard and integrate people earlier on after we determine that they have attributes that will truly qualify for the position. So what's their craft qualifications as well culturally fit in this organization. Then the next piece is how do I integrate them upon hire to set them up to be successful? And that's really what we're focusing on here. We're not saying that there are all these low performers and we need to get rid of them. We create actually for in many of our organizations, those people exit themselves when they don't like where the organization's going. The organization's becoming more successful in terms of its goals and priorities and targets. The organization and the teams are becoming stronger based on this internal culture. And what's happening with these low performers or outliers, they're looking at that saying, I just don't fit here anymore.
Mm.
And those aren't like high performing misfits typically. Those are people that are legitimately we're trying to create these opportunities to brush them up and uncover them like a gem, like polish up that diamond, but they're not wanting to do the work. They're not wanting to be a part of that.
What is your personal conviction, or maybe your theory? Is it live to work or work to live? Is it live to work? So in other words, you're here on this planet to actually perform,
Yeah,
do something, which is very Anglo-Saxon,
sure.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Very Anglo-Saxon, Chinese, Indian. Okay, this is very quick and dirty what I'm saying right now.
yeah, yeah, yep,
But if I didn't know you, if I first time I would meet you, um, then we shake hands. Okay, my name is Rob.
yeah,
My name is Chris. What do you do? That's the first question. You are
yeah,
what you do. In other
yeah,
countries, typically in Scandinavian countries, and the Netherlands are good
yeah,
examples. Iceland is a good, Finland as well. It's I need to work to live. Work is
yeah,
not a motivator for me.
yeah,
How?
yeah.
What is your philosophy about that?
Um, so. at my age, where I am today, I believe my answer is very different than I probably
Need to
would
know
have
your
been
age
at
now, Rob.
47,
Okay.
versus when I was, say, 22.
Yeah.
But that's a life stage thing. Would I need to do younger? At this point, uh, I'm engaged and invested in my work because it brings me joy and it's fun.
Mhm.
But I also engage and invest in areas of my life that are outside of work because they bring me joy, peace, and fun. And to me, it's the balance of the two. So I'll give you an example. We'll travel for a week or 2 weeks on vacation.
Mhm.
I'll eventually miss work, not because it's tied up with my identity. And that's kind of what you're speaking to there is what's the relationship between how I see myself in my identity
Mhm.
as it relates to work. And
Sure.
I don't see my work as a part of my identity, not anymore, certainly.
Yeah.
I see it as a part of it enhances my life. I'm fortunate because I get to do something that I actually find fun,
Yeah.
but it's also something that, after this podcast, we're wrapping it up and we're heading out of town to go take some away time where there will be some work thoughts and planning because it's our business and we have to reflect upon it. We're going to retreat a bit,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I'm very happy pausing and slowing down. But I'll tell you, it wasn't until I met my wife that this happened, right? Like you would never find me sitting beside a pool or on a beach, just unpacking and letting it just come out of me and downtime in
Yeah.
my 20s. I
Yeah.
was too caught up with being busy and moving, and now I have a different approach to that.
How would you apply your train of thoughts to say a country like Sweden or because the outlook on
Yeah,
work is so different in these
yeah,
countries
yeah,
and in these countries as in Scandinavian countries
yeah,
and say the United States or even Canada.
yeah. Yeah, so I think my thoughts now are more well aligned than they've ever been in the past. That because work is a part of the overarching experience,
Mhm.
and it's a part of it. It gives us permission and the ability to do some things that we might not have ever been able to do,
Mhm.
and 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 it's relative to the scale of which we can have our free time, what I believe. And so I think what we do is relevant to those countries, to those practices, because what we're trying to do is really just embrace the individual
Mhm.
as they exist in this work environment. Like, let's be honest, we are dedicating a lot of our time to a job. Our best waking hours in many
Oh
instances
yeah,
are dedicated to a job.
it is. Yeah.
Well, why can't we integrate a level of joy and peace in it,
Mhm.
like we espouse for with our family, with our communities, with our time outside of work?
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that work isn't fun. It's just how are we prioritizing this, right? And so that's a great kind of segue that brings us back to that individualist driven lens
Mhm.
that suggests that we're driving, we're pushing, I'll sleep when I'm dead type of thing.
Yeah.
And your point here is that there's other cultures, other communities, other countries that don't share that perspective.
Yeah.
And and so what I'm trying to do is really embrace what's our human condition. And it just so happens to be that we are the best versions of ourselves outside of work in many instances. How can we be the best versions of ourselves inside of work?
As well.
And for the leadership implication for these people, how do I help facilitate that or create those conditions so people can thrive and be healthy at that level in the work environment when I'm responsible for them?
Yeah. Oh, good point. Sounds like a professor almost who's
Yeah,
teaching.
yeah, right.
You've done this before, I presume.
Yeah, but I'm happy to do this with you because a lot of this stuff I've never, as we unpack these concepts of this collectivist and individualist, like people have talked about that forever.
Yeah.
How I'm talking about it is there's not a lot of evidence out there in the research to this level as it relates to organization
Mhm.
fit. And so I haven't had the opportunity to really discuss it with many people.
Yeah.
So this is pretty off the cuff. I'm still kind of pulling together thoughts of where we go with this stuff.
Mhm. But it's all and I generally it's always good if you have a theory in your mind or
Yeah.
to reproduce it towards someone else, me in this case, it
Yeah.
helps you structure your own, okay, where am I off, where am I right? So that's I think that's how it works. So
Helps me find my voice. Thank you for letting me
no,
help
no,
find
you're
my
more than
voice
welcome.
today.
And you can look back and you can actually listen back
Yeah,
to this podcast.
yeah,
Rob, I'm going to ask you two last questions. Can you give us three
yeah,
tips to become more culturally competent, please?
yeah. So
And I'm
the
going to make
first
notes
one,
on the other screen. So
yeah, yeah, go ahead. So the first one is, I would say, is remain curious, open-minded.
uh-huh.
And these are not in any particular order because I think the first one for me would actually be travel. And I've heard you talk about that in the past, and but that doesn't even necessarily mean outside of the country travel, especially in the US. The
Uh-huh.
US has such diversity, and even just going down at the neighborhood level, if you can get out and be in a different environment, a different neighborhood,
Mhm.
if you're from the rural area and you go to, say, San Francisco, that's going to be a change. But
Sure.
then can you find yourself down into Chinatown for
Yeah.
a little bit more of a shift, right? Like, so find those spots that you're curious about, but are outside of your comfort area. So something that might stretch you or open your mind, right? Like to me, I like a variety of different foods. I think it's pretty cool. Like, so I was in Singapore this last year, first time there, and I had the best time meeting the nicest people, but also having amazing food in the
Mhm.
hawker markets and, Little India and Chinatown. Like these are experiences because I wasn't in India, I haven't been to India despite some plans. It at least gives me a little bit more appreciation for the stuff that I appreciate and enjoy about my friends that are from India, the food, the cuisine, stuff like that. So the third thing would be, as I think about this and I have a conversation, say with you or someone from a different culture, or even within my own organizations, I have my own belief systems. And we often hear the concept of perception is reality. And we actually really push back on that from our practice here, our company. We have a number of tenets, and one of the tenets is perception is not reality. It
Mhm.
might be how you think the world's actually functioning, or it might be quote unquote your reality, how we've talked about in the past. The reality is if you disappear, reality's still occurring, right? Like, and so what I ask people to do is consider whose truth is this? When you come to this opinion, especially as we think about it cross-culturally, and you're making these judgments, these appraisals on other people, whose truth is this?
Yep.
Is this the universal truth, or is this my culturally specific mindset lens that's
Mhm.
informing that truth?
A good point. Interesting comments you have there. My last question, Rob, for
Yes.
you is if people want to get in touch with you, they'd like to know more about what you
Yeah.
do and maybe discuss whatever the theory that you just shared with us here. How
Yeah.
can they do that best, please?
Two different paths. So our company's name is Black River Performance Management, but that's way too long of a URL. So if
Mhm.
you go to Black River, then the letter P for performance and the letter M for management.com, you'll find our company, our overviews. You could book a meeting right there online if you want to visit with me on any of these concepts,
Mhm.
or go on to LinkedIn. Last name is spelt like lion, Lion, but it's pronounced Leon. So look for Rob or Robert Leon or Lion, Lion on LinkedIn, and you will find my profile there. And it's pretty narrow. It used to be much more professorial, like open but now it's more business targeted to the points you were making about your
Mhm.
how I'm positioning myself. But pretty broad based. We specialize in all things that deal with human behavior. So love to have a conversation, love to connect with people, and love to connect with your listeners.
And all this stuff will be in the show notes when coming up.
Wonderful.
All right. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much, Rob. And I'm pretty sure we'll be in touch in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Have a great day.
Thank you.